Captains, we finally have a leader that'll allow us to use that Purple Film Starter deck. That's right, DoFILMingo is here to save the day, which is weird because he's a villain. By the way, if you want to see the deck list, it should be right over here. So if you want that, check that out. But in this video, we are going to be going over the core cards, the essentials, and the flex cards, the things that can make this deck your own. And honestly, if you played the Film Kid deck, either in OP02 or OP03, this deck is gonna feel right at home. So without further ado, let's hop into it. Alright, so starting us off with our leader, here we have it, Don Quixote DoFILMingo, 5,000 power, 4 life, but that is because he is a dual color leader, green and purple, and then his ability is, at the end of your turn, set up to 2 of your Dawn cards as active. So each and every turn, you are going to have 2 Dawn available, which is great because there are a bunch of 2-cost counter events that both purple and green run. And the fact that those are always live is honestly incredible. Next up, going into the core, we are pretty much looking at the quintessential film package, just with a couple of additions. So first of all, we gotta talk about a guy that we've never talked about before, Buena Fiesta. 1 cost to play, 0 power, but 2k counter, which is nice. And then on play, look at the top 5 cards from your deck, reveal 1 film type card other than Buena Fiesta, and add to your hand. Then return all the other cards to the bottom of the deck in any order. Essentially, this is a film searcher. But if you remember the madness that was OP02 Zoro, you now have a searcher that can look for a searcher, aka your Namis. And vice versa, the Nami can find your Buena Fiesta. And regardless of whether you're going first or second, Buena Fiesta is something you want to see in your opening hand, just because you like to be able to get a little bit of that search out. Also, while I'm here, you do definitely want to go second as Doffy, very similar to Film Kid. If you go second, it just means that on turn 2, you have your Nami available to do her search. Speaking of Nami, here she is, 3 cost to play, 5,000 power, but on play, but also when attacking, tap 1 Dawn, and then look at the top 3 cards from your deck, reveal up to 1 film type card other than Nami, and add it to your hand, then replace the rest of them into the bottom of your deck in any order. So this is really good for recurring film searches, because once you put Nami down, and once you're able to kind of, feel comfortable protecting her, you're going to want to search for your Luffy next. Or, in some cases, you might want to be looking for Brook. Brook is our next essential card, 4 cost to play, 5,000 power, counter plus 1k, but on play up to 1 cost 3 or lower film or Straw Hat Crew type card, character card from your hand. So with him, you can play your Namis, your Bartolomeos, even your Choppers if you want. So this is just a really good card to combo off with once you drop down your Luffy. And that's kind of where this whole entire film cascade effect happens with the film cards. And then speaking of the man of the hour, here's Monkey D. Luffy, 7 cost to play, 7,000 power, is a blocker, but on play you can play a cost 4 or lower film card or Straw Hat Crew character card from your hand. So typically what you'll see is play the Luffy, use that to play the Brook, use that to play the Nami, and then if you're going turn 2, or if you went second and you have 8 Dawn essentially, you can use the last Dawn to use Nami's ability. And then anyone who is playing the Film Kid package knows just how valuable this next card is. Bartolomeo, 2 cost to play, 3,000 power, counter plus 1k, but at the end of your turn, you can rest this character to set up to 1 of your other film type character cards as active. So typically, this would allow you to attack with your Luffy and then use Bartolomeo's ability to unrest the Luffy. And for the most part, if you played Film Kid in those previous sets, this all looks very familiar. So what are some of the differences? Well, Guild Tesoro. Guild Tesoro, 5 cost to play, 6,000 power, no counter, but when attacking, Dawn -2, draw 2 cards. So Guild Tesoro is a really great play to, play before the Luffy turn, right? And allows you to get 2 free cards, which is nice because there are some really essential cards in here that aren't searchable by our searchers. So let's talk about them now. First up, we gotta talk about Sugar. This is a new card from OP04. This is a super rare as well, so gonna be highly sought after. 2 cost to play, 0 power, counter plus 1k, but Sugar's power really comes in her ability. On your opponent's turn, once per turn, when your opponent plays a character card, if your leader has Don Quixote Pirates type in it, rest up to one of your opponent's characters, then rest this card. This is really powerful against decks like Zoro, who typically want to keep their cards up right before it's, the opportune time to attack. This kind of forces their hand a little bit. Or if there is a problematic character card that your opponent is trying to reserve and they play something, you can suspend, that problematic card. Or if that's the only character on their board, just suspend that one. And it's awesome because it doesn't have a cost limit, right? I was playtesting against an opponent who was using the Red Purple Luffy, which I know that's not going to be coming out for a while, but it will be part of our meta at some point. And he dropped down the 10 cost Luffy that has Rush. Immediately suspended it, right? And I know that's like kind of an extreme example, but the fact that you can suspend anything is pretty sick. And if that wasn't enough, Sugar does have an on-play ability as well. On play, rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less. I do kind of like this as a turn 2 play if I, for some reason, don't have my Nami. Or if I don't have any of my 5 costs I'm looking for, I'll usually play it, on that turn 3. But the more I can control my opponent's board with Sugar, the better. Also, having multiple of these is kind of wild. But probably the most wild card in here is our next essential. It is 10 cost Doffy. 10 cost Doffy is, 10 cost, 10,000 power, but on play, a total of up to 3 of your opponent's rested characters or leaders do not become active during your opponent's next refresh phase. If you saw my preview video from before, I called this the Puppet Mon of the One Piece world, but the ability to keep your opponent's character cards down is kind of incredible. Paired with Sugar's ability, honestly, I really like that combo. It is a shame that in OP04, it's not searchable, but we'll for sure use it here in the film package. Last but not least in the essentials, another Don Quixote Byhert's card, and this one's Spiderweb. So 2 costs to play, counter event, up to one of your leaders or character cards gains plus 4,000 power during this battle, then set up to one of your characters as active. Essentially, this combines the 2 primary counter events that you use in the Film Kid deck, Paradise Waterfall, as well as Punk Hazard, and it combines it into one card that if you have in your hand, it is guaranteed to be online because of Doffy Leader's ability. Also has a trigger ability up to one of your leaders gains plus 2,000 power for this turn, not just for the battle, for this turn, which is kind of nice to throw off the battle math a little bit. And then last but not least, let's get into our flex cards. I have Chopper as a flex, mostly because I'm primarily using him as a 2k counter. The benefit of having him versus any other 2k counter, he's searchable by both Nami as well as Buena Fiesta. I also have Shiki in here as a 2k counter, once again, primarily because he is searchable, not really using his trigger at all. It's really just for the 2k counter. Next up, we have Uta. So Uta is in here, 4 cost to play, 5,000 power, counter plus 1k, but on block, Dawn -1, rest up to one of your opponent's characters that costs 5 or less. Obviously, this is a film card. It's a film blocker, so it can be searched. It can be played out by a blocker Luffy, which is really nice. And that on-block ability has some really good synergy with 10 cost DoFILMingo, if you're able to, time that out right. But I think Uta is a very good card, especially in this more defense-oriented style of the deck. Next up, I do have Diamante. So 5 cost to play, 6,000 power, counter plus 1k. Is a blocker, and Dawn ×1, end of your turn. If you have 2 or more active Dawn, set this character as active. Admittingly, I was a little on the fence about Diamante until I saw Cardi Kaizoku's video on it, and I was like, that's too much value to not include. And if you notice on the preview of the deck list, I only have it as 2 copies, just because I'm not relying on it. But if I am able to find it in my hand, play it on curve, why not? It is a cheaper version of a 7 cost kid, right? As long as you're able to commit to Dawn, you're looking at a very powerful attacker / blocker. But if you wanted to replace it with something else, or have more copies of something else, say you want more copies of 2k counters, sure, I can understand that. But he's not bad if I see him, and if I happen to bottom deck him, I'm not crying about it. Next up, we do have Paradise Waterfall. This is 1 cost to play, counter. Your leader or one of your characters gets plus 2,000 power during this battle, then set one of your characters as active. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, hey, isn't it kind of redundant to have Paradise Waterfall and Spiderweb in the same deck? Yes, but that's kind of the point, right? Sometimes I want to, reactivate one of my characters, but I also don't want to waste a 4,000 counter. So having Paradise Waterfall gives me a way to do this a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Cheaply, I guess, in terms of not wasting a counter. And then it does have a kind of interesting trigger where you can KO up to one of your opponent's rested characters with a cost of 4 or less. But essentially I included this as a cheap version of Spiderweb. And then last but not least, this is the event card that is probably going to turn to most heads, but let me explain. Hell's Judgment, 2 costs to play, counter event, Dawn -1, give up to 2 of your opponent's leaders or characters -3,000 power during this turn. And then trigger, if your opponent has 6 or more Dawn, your opponent returns one of their Dawn to their Dawn deck, which I'm primarily not using this for the trigger ability, I'm using it for its counter ability. Now I think the other viable counter you can use here is the starter deck film one, the purple one. If I remember correctly, it's Union Armada, where essentially it's plus 4,000, but also that character becomes indestructible. But I got 2 sort of problems with Union Armada. The first one is you can't use it on your leader card. So that plus 4,000 is only for your film characters. And that's because Leader Doffy is not a film leader. And then the other one is that you got to pair it with another counter event in order to kind of get the most out of it, right? Because it's plus 4,000 power, it becomes indestructible. But if you use it on something that you're actively blocking with, say your blocker Luffy, yeah, the blocker Luffy is indestructible, but now it's also tapped down. You need to be able to reactivate it with either Paradise Waterfall or Spiderweb, and then have a third attack come at you where you're blocking. I mean, sure, could you use it to target something else like your Namis or your Brooks? I think Nami actually is probably the one you want to save the most, sure. But I do think that Hell's Judgment just is a little bit better of an event. -3,000 power is nothing to, sneeze at. And the fact that you can put it onto 2 things is kind of incredible. And I think you get the most bang for your buck when it comes to things that can reactivate themselves, such as Leader Kid, Leader Lucci, or, probably more relevant, Monkey D. Luffy, Gear 4th Luffy. Sure, if they put the King Kong gun on him, and then he's swinging, plus 6,000 twice, Hell's Judgment looks a little bit more flimsy, but they got to be able to commit all that Dawn for it. If they're just using Luffy to try and clear your board normally with his normal, 7,000 power, I believe he is, then yeah, Hell's Judgment automatically puts him down to 4k. And it is for the turn, so he is still 4k even after he reactivates, right? And I think in the English meta, we are going to be seeing a lot of Rebecca, so that means a lot of Gear 4th Luffy, so that's why I like Hell's Judgment. Sure, is it kind of a pain in the butt that it can't be searched by any of my searchers? Sure. But you know what else can't be searched by my other searchers? All my other event cards. My DoFILMingo, my Sugar. These are the things I'm willing to accept. And I'm willing to accept them because this is a very fun deck. Maybe I'm biased because I am a Film Kid leader, but I mean, just take a look at this thing. Starting with our leader, we have 1 Don Quixote DoFILMingo. We're running 4 Buena Fiestas, 4 copies of Sugar, 4 copies of the 2K Tony Chopper, 2 copies of Shiki, just because I needed some additional 2K counters and could only fit in this much, 3 Bartolomeos, 4 Nami, 4 Brook, we got 4 Uta, I only got 2 of the Diamantes, like I said, not really concerned if I don't see him, because I do have a better 5 cost play to do, which is Guild Tesoro, got him at 3 copies, 4 copies of Blocker Luffy, because it is necessary, it just is. Maybe a little weird, but I only got 3 copies of DoFILMingo. I am thinking about maybe putting this to 4 just because of how kind of necessary he is in some matchups. And since I can't search him and most likely I'm going to bottom deck him a lot, having max copies to try and just, play the numbers game with my Guild Tesoro, it's probably the move, but let me know in the comments down below what you think. 2 copies Paradise Waterfall, 3 copies of Hell's Judgment, and then 4 copies of Spiderweb, because that is the counter event I really want to see. Honestly, like I said, this is a really fun deck. I really enjoyed the playtesting I did with it. I will say the Rebecca matchup, which I saw a lot, it is a little bit of an uphill battle to overcome, but I think it can be done. But if you want to see what kind of cards you might be facing in the Rebecca matchup, click this video here to see that deck profile. Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. And captains, remember, build what you like, play what you love, and I'll catch you in the next video.